My sister tried to steal the $30 million company I built in 10 years, but when I found out Dad made her co-CEO without telling me, I left them with nothing, and they never saw the destruction coming. I'm 34 years old. I'm a furniture designer. And what happened 2 years ago at my father's birthday party basically destroyed any illusion I had about what family means. The thing is, I spent 10 years, literally an entire decade of my life, building my dad's woodworking business into a $30 million company, and my sister tried to take everything from me in a single night. But anyway, I guess I should start from the beginning. So this makes sense. I grew up in a woodworking shop. My father, Christopher Morgan, had this small business where he made furniture by hand, the kind of artisanal stuff that people buy because they want something unique, but that honestly doesn't generate much money. My older sister Brooke was always the favorite. That was obvious since we were kids. She was brilliant and ambitious, and everything she did was perfect in Dad's eyes. I was the practical one. The one who preferred working with her hands. The one who spent summers in the workshop, learning to sand and varnish while Brooke was at leadership camps or preparing to get into an Ivy League school. My mother, Elizabeth, always tried to compensate for the difference, told me that Dad loved us both equally. But I wasn't stupid. I could see how his eyes lit up when Brooke talked about her plans to change the corporate world. When I finished college, I studied industrial design because I liked it, but also because I knew I could apply it to the family business. Brooke was already in Chicago doing her MBA and making like 6 figures in consulting. Dad was proud of her, obviously. But his business was struggling. Artisanal things didn't sell like they used to, and he didn't understand how to adapt to the modern market. I started helping him. First just on weekends and then full-time, because someone had to do it, and Brooke definitely wasn't going to leave her glamorous city life to come get her hands dirty with sawdust. What started as helping Dad became something bigger. When I realized we could modernize everything without losing the artisanal essence that made our furniture special. The truth is, it was my idea to implement the 3D design software that allowed clients to customize their furniture before we built it. Sounds simple now, but at that time, like 10 years ago, it was innovative in the custom furniture market. I spent months learning the software, setting up the system, photographing every piece we made to create a digital library. Dad thought I was wasting my time, told me people wanted to see the wood, touch it, not look at a screen. But I knew we had to evolve or we were going to close in 5 years tops. The first year was tough. I'm not going to lie. We invested everything we had in the new system and digital marketing. I managed social media, answered emails until 2 in the morning, went to design fairs on weekends. Dad kept doing what he'd always done, building beautiful furniture. But now we had a process that allowed clients to be part of the design. And it worked. I mean, it worked better than anyone could have imagined. By the 3rd year, we were billing $2 million. We'd hired 6 more carpenters, and I developed an entire line of modular furniture that went viral on Pinterest. Dad finally admitted that maybe I'd been right about technology, though he never said it in so many words. Just gave me a pat on the back and said I was doing a good job. The next few years were like a roller coaster, but in a good way. We opened a bigger showroom, then another. Started working with high-end interior designers, with boutique hotels that wanted unique furniture for their spaces. I designed every collection, supervised every expansion, negotiated every important contract. There were nights when I slept in the workshop because we had an impossible deadline, and I didn't trust anyone else to make sure everything came out perfect. My personal life basically didn't exist. I had a couple of relationships that went nowhere because we was married to the business. But honestly, I didn't care, because we were building something incredible. By the time I turned 30, Morgan Designs, that's what we'd renamed it, was billing $30 million a year, and we were nationally recognized as one of the best custom furniture companies in the country. And then Brooke decided she wanted to come home. She'd been in Chicago this whole time, had gone through 3 different companies, each job more prestigious than the last, according to her, though she never lasted more than 2 years at any of them. She called Dad and told him she missed family, that she wanted to be closer, that maybe she could contribute her corporate experience to the family business. I should have seen it coming. Should have known something was wrong when Dad told me with that huge smile that Brooke was coming home and was going to join the team. I asked him in what capacity exactly, because we already had a solid organizational structure and didn't need an Ivy League MBA to do what we were already doing well. But Dad told me not to be difficult, that she was my sister, and it would be good to have the family together again. Brooke arrived with her designer heels and her power suits, and her I know more than all of you energy. The first week was observing, taking notes. asking questions that sounded innocent, but basically questioned every decision I'd made in the last 10 years. Why were we using this wood supplier? Why hadn't we explored international markets? Why was our profit margin only 23% when it should be 30%? As if I hadn't thought about all that 1,000 times. As if there weren't strategic reasons behind every decision. But she had her MBA and her consulting experience, and Dad listened to her like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. A month after being there, Dad called me into his office and told me he'd made a decision, that Brooke was going to be co-CEO with me. Co-CEO. He didn't even consult me, we didn't even discuss the structure or responsibilities. He just came in one day and told me it was already decided. I tried to stay calm, asked him what specific experience in manufacturing or design Brooke had that justified that position, and he told me it wasn't just about technical experience, that Brooke understood the corporate landscape, that she could take the company to the next level. I reminded him that I was the one who'd taken the company from a garage workshop to 30 million in revenue, and he told me not to be selfish, that this was a family business and we should all work together. Selfish. He called me selfish, because I didn't want to hand over half the control of my company to someone who'd just arrived. Things got worse fast. Brooke hired a marketing team without consulting me, spent $150,000 on a campaign I'd specifically rejected because it didn't align with our brand. She started talking to our biggest corporate clients, promising them discounts and terms that made the contracts barely profitable. She reorganized the design team, put her own people in key positions, basically took control piece by piece, while Dad supported her in everything. Every time I raised a concern, they told me I was resistant to change, that I needed to trust the process, that Brooke knew what she was doing because she'd worked with Fortune 500 companies. It didn't matter that those Fortune 500 companies had nothing to do with artisanal furniture. It didn't matter that everything I'd built was being dismantled before my eyes. And then came Dad's 58th birthday. We organized this big party at a nice hotel, invited clients, suppliers, family friends, like 200 people. I'd been working on a new product line I was going to present that night, had spent months on the design. It was basically the natural evolution of everything we'd built. I was standing near the bar when Brooke took the microphone and started her speech. She talked about Dad, about his legacy, about how the business had grown so much in recent years, and then she said something that froze my blood. She said she was excited to announce that she was going to assume the role of sole CEO of Morgan Designs, that under her leadership the company was going to expand internationally, that she had a vision for the next 10 years. People started applauding. Dad was smiling like it was the proudest moment of his life, and I was standing there feeling like I'd been kicked in the stomach. Brooke continued, thanked Dad for founding the company, thanked the employees for their dedication, briefly mentioned that I'd helped with some aspects of the growth, but that now it was time for more strategic and professional leadership. Some aspects of the growth. 10 years of my life, reduced to some aspects. The room was applauding, and I couldn't even breathe right. Felt like the walls were closing in on me. I looked at Mom, and she looked uncomfortable, but not surprised. So she already knew. Everyone knew except me. I'd been ambushed at my own father's birthday party. I didn't make a scene. I'm not going to give anyone that satisfaction. I left my glass on the table, grabbed my purse, and walked out of the hotel without saying a word. Ignored Mom's messages asking where I was. Ignored calls from some employees who were probably confused. I drove back to my apartment, sat at my desk, and spent all night reviewing documents, contracts, incorporation papers, everything I had related to the business. Because the thing is, Brooke and Dad had assumed I was just the talented employee, the obedient daughter who did the hard work while they made the important decisions. But what they didn't know, what apparently no one had bothered to check, was that when we restructured the company 5 years ago to facilitate expansion, I made sure to keep 53% of the shares. Dad had 30%, Mom 10%, and we'd given the remaining 7% to Brooke when she joined as a gesture of goodwill. I was the majority shareholder. I technically owned the company. And that wasn't all. Turns out when I developed the main collections that generated 80% of our revenue, I'd registered them under a separate LLC that I controlled. The company had a license to use those designs, but that license expired every 2 years and had to be renewed. The last renewal had been 18 months ago, and guess when the next one expired? In exactly 6 weeks. Plus, several of our biggest contracts, the ones I'd personally negotiated, had clauses that allowed clients to terminate the agreement if there were significant changes in the company's leadership. Clauses I'd insisted on, including specifically to protect my position, though at the time I thought it was just a safety measure I'd never need to use. The following Monday, I arrived at the office early. Before anyone else, I called our corporate lawyer, the same one who'd handled all our legal matters for years and who owed loyalty to me more than anyone. I explained the situation and he confirmed what I already knew, that as majority shareholder, I had the power to veto any important decision, including changes in executive leadership. I asked him to prepare the necessary documentation and schedule an emergency board meeting for that same week. Brooke arrived at the office that morning looking triumphant, greeting everyone like she was already queen of the castle. Dad arrived shortly after, still with that proud smile. Neither of them said anything to me. Not good morning, not how are you after leaving the party, nothing. As if I simply didn't matter. I waited until they were in the boardroom with the senior team for my first move. I walked into the meeting. Brooke was leading about new expansion plans and interrupted as calmly as possible. I said we needed to talk about the ownership structure of the company because there seemed to be confusion about who had authority to make certain decisions. Brooke looked at me like I was crazy and said it wasn't the time, that they were in the middle of something important. I pulled out the papers the lawyer had prepared and put them on the table. I told her that as owner of 53% of Morgan Designs, I had final control over all executive decisions, and that her self-proclamation as sole CEO had no legal validity without my approval. Approval I definitely hadn't given. The room went silent, like that uncomfortable silence where you can hear even your own breathing. Dad started to say something about how this was a family matter, not about papers. And I cut him off. I told him he'd made this a matter of papers when he appointed Brooke without consulting me, when he allowed me to be publicly humiliated at his party. Brooke tried to recover, said we could resolve this like adults, that clearly there had been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. As if announcing herself as sole CEO was a small communication error. I told her there was nothing to resolve, that she'd made her intention to push me out of the business I built very clear, and that I was simply clarifying the legal reality of the situation. Then came my second card, the one that was really going to hurt. I informed them that the main designs of our best-selling collections were owned by my personal LLC, that the current license expired in 6 weeks, and that I had no intention of renewing it under current terms. Without those designs, the company basically couldn't operate because they constituted the core of our catalog and the reason clients came to us. Dad turned red, started yelling that I was being vindictive, that I was destroying his legacy over a tantrum. I told him he'd destroyed his legacy when he allowed one of his daughters to humiliate and marginalize the other after a decade of work. Brooke tried a different approach. Told me she understood. I was upset, but this wasn't the way to handle things, that we were in the same family and should be able to find a solution. I asked her if she'd considered that when she decided to remove me from my position without even the courtesy of a prior conversation, and she went quiet because she had no answer for that. Over the next few days, I personally contacted each of our main corporate clients. I explained that there had been unauthorized changes in the company's leadership and that I, as operational founder and lead designer, wanted to assure them we'd maintain our quality standards. Several of those clients immediately activated the termination clauses I mentioned, not because they didn't trust the company, but because their contracts literally gave them that option in the face of leadership changes and they wanted to renegotiate terms that represented like 40% of our projected revenue for the next year that was suddenly up in the air. The emergency board meeting was brutal. Our lawyer presented all the documentation, confirmed my position as majority shareholder, explained the implications of the situation with the designs and contracts. Brooke tried to argue that I was being irrational, that I was putting the company at risk out of ego. I reminded her that she was the one who'd created this situation by attempting a corporate coup at Dad's birthday party. I proposed a resolution. She resigned as co-CEO immediately, returned to a consultant role without executive authority, or I withdrew all design licenses and let the company collapse. It was a harsh ultimatum, but after what she'd done to me, I wasn't feeling particularly charitable. Dad tried to negotiate, suggest compromises, but I wasn't in the mood to negotiate. I'd spent 10 years building something beautiful, only to have them try to take it from me without a second thought. Brooke finally agreed to resign as co-CEO, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. The math was clear and she had no real power. She left that meeting without looking at me. And honestly, I didn't care. Dad stayed. Tried to talk to me afterward. tell me I'd gone too far, that I was destroying the family. I told him the family had destroyed itself when they chose favoritism and betrayal over fairness and recognition. 2 months later, Dad retired. Said it was for health reasons, but we all knew it was because he couldn't face the fact that he'd backed the wrong horse and now had to live with the consequences. He looked aged, defeated, and part of me felt sorry, but most of me just felt relieved that he was finally out of my way. Brooke got a new job in California at some tech startup, posted on LinkedIn about new beginnings and exciting opportunities, as if she hadn't just tried to steal a company and failed spectacularly. Mom tried to keep the peace, organized a Christmas dinner that year, and insisted we all attend because we were still family. That dinner was probably the most awkward thing I've experienced. Brooke and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was with that icy courtesy that's worse than shouting. She made some passive-aggressive comment about how some people prioritize work over family, and I responded that some people confuse family with an excuse to take advantage of others. Mom started crying, Dad went to his study, and I left before dessert. I haven't spoken to Brooke since then, blocked her everywhere, and made it very clear I don't want to know anything about her. Dad and I have a kind of civil but distant relationship. We see each other at Mom's birthdays and Christmas, but we don't have that closeness we used to have, and I guess that's never coming back. The business is better than ever. Ironically, without Brooke's interference, and without Dad questioning every modern decision I make, I can run the company the way it should be run. We recovered all the contracts that had been paused. I launched 2 new collections that have been massive hits, and we're on track to reach 40 million this year. I hired an executive team that respects my vision and understands that innovation and craftsmanship aren't opposing concepts. The office culture is completely different now. People feel empowered to contribute ideas without fear of someone with an MBA coming to tell them they're wrong. Do I regret how I handled everything? No. Honestly, I don't. I could have been more diplomatic, I suppose. Could have tried to find some compromise that kept the family intact. But for what? So Brooke could keep trying to undermine me. So Dad could keep treating me like the less important daughter. So I could keep swallowing my resentment while others took credit for my work. No thanks. Some will say I was too harsh. That family is family no matter what. But those people probably never had their family actively trying to destroy something it took them a decade to build. Last week, one of our newest clients, a luxury hotel on the coast, asked me about my story, how I got to where I am. I told him the short version, that I'd taken my father's carpentry business and modernized it, left out all the dramatic family part. He told me it was inspiring that someone so young had built something so successful, and I just smiled because I wasn't going to get into details about what it really cost. What I did tell him was that sometimes you have to be willing to lose things to protect what really matters, and that not everyone will understand your decisions, but that doesn't make them wrong. I guess in the end I learned that genuine success attracts both admiration and envy, even within your own family, and that you can't build anything lasting on a foundation of inequality and lack of respect. Morgan Designs is now completely mine, carries my vision, reflects my work, and no one can take that from me. Is it lonely sometimes? Yes, definitely. Is it worth it? Every damn day. Because when I look at what we've built, when I see furniture I designed in beautiful homes across the country, when I hear my team talk passionately about their projects, I know I made the right decision. And if that makes me the villain in my family's story, well, I guess I can live with that.